This Friday on Paramount Plus, we're getting the release of the prequel film Orphan First Kill. But before we dive into that hopefully good slasher, it's time to talk about the 2009 underrated gem, Orphan. What's up, guys, and welcome to my review of the original Orphan, a pretty underrated movie as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not sure why. This is the first time that I've talked about it. I did not expect this movie to ever get a follow-up or a prequel, and it looks like we're getting one, so what better time than now to talk about this film. And for how terrifying the concept is, I'm surprised we haven't gotten more classics out of the creepy killer kid subgenre. The Omen will always be the greatest. The Omen will always be the benchmark that they are all held against, the standard. Beyond that, the only one I can ever think of, the only one I ever remember is The Good Son, which was interesting as a kid, watching the kid from Home Alone be a psycho. As an adult, not as good of a movie as I remember. But Orphan takes this great concept about this very broken family that is having very troubled times, that's kind of on the heels of explosion in certain ways, and they, for a very healthy reason, seek out to adopt a child to try to repair their family. And unfortunately for them, they picked the most whacked out, fucked up kid of the bunch. Starting off with the positives, you gotta give credit where credit is due. The central performance of the villain by Isabelle Fuhrman is awesome. She completely makes Esther into a potential horror icon. We'll see. It depends on Orphan First Kill. That might kill it, but we'll see. But as far as this one movie, for a girl that was like 11 or 12 years old whenever she was playing this role, it was very impressive how mature she was able to be with the different shades of Esther, because when we'll talk about regarding the twist of the movie, there's certain layers to this character that a child actor has to be able to kind of dive into and portray accurately to make that twist work. And there is so many times throughout this movie that not only is she creepy and not only is she sinister to where she's actually terrifying for an adult, even though she's a little pint-sized kid, there's a lot of layers to her where she actually portrays herself in an adult way, where she's talking about things in an adult way, and she has this dialect and she has this kind of confidence to her and this maturity to the way that she gives her lines that makes it feel like a kid that actually can go toe-to-toe with an adult talking about mature subjects, which there's plenty in this film. It's to the point where I would say that her performance as Esther is actually the main thing, the main driving force that is meriting the follow-up, the prequel film, Orphan First Kill, because I don't know if this was financially successful. I don't necessarily think that it's a wild, like, cult hit. Us horror fans know of it, but I really never hear anybody talk about it, so I consider it underrated. It's just because of how great she was in that role that they go, there's more here. We can do more with this character and this actress. And speaking about performances, I also think that Vera Farmiga is awesome in this, and I just can't help but love her. I adore her to death in just about everything that I see her in. She's most notable nowadays for the Conjuring films, but I've been a fan of hers ever since like the early 2000s with movies like Running Scared. And so when you see her here, even though her like ugly cry tendency when it comes to certain things might be a little too much for some people, for the extreme situations that her character is in this movie, and for all of the trauma and all the baggage that her character and her family brings into the film as like past events, to me it works. So all throughout the movie, whenever she's trying to be a loving mom, when she's trying to portray somebody with past substance abuse, when she's trying to have this kind of surface value rekindling of her love with her husband, Peter Sarsgaard, and it starts to get into all of their couple trauma from years past. Even when it gets to the point in the movie where she starts to think that something is wrong with Esther, and she quite literally turns on her and starts being very suspicious and angry and even violent towards her, and kind of by extension her husband, it's also very convincing that she would just get that manic over the situation because nobody is listening to her, nobody believes her, especially her husband, and we'll get into him. But also, she's so good at all of the emotional requirements of this character that you understand to a degree why other people would think she's a little bit nuts. And I also really like the bit of a relationship that buds between Esther and Max, the youngest daughter, because there's a bit of a void there with the attention that Max gets, and there's also an event regarding some trauma with her as well. It's a fucked up family. But when Esther comes in and very much manipulates Max into kind of being her partner in crime to a certain degree, somebody that's going to keep her secret, somebody that's going to help her do all these things that she's trying to do. It creates a very intense situation because kids definitely will bond to each other, and younger kids don't quite understand the larger picture of what's going on. So that adds this whole other layer of complication to where you got Vera Farmiga's character that knows something's going on with Esther, but even her youngest daughter is kind of complicit in what is going on by no fault of her own.
I had to kill her because she was going to tell on me. You're not going to tell on me, are you?
And I love the fact of how intense and how far this movie goes with certain subject matter, with the violence, with the blood. I mean, there's really only 2 kills in this movie done by Esther, but it feels like a very violent movie throughout, even though there's only 2 deaths, to the point where when I started adding them up, I was like, shit, I would have thought there was like 4 people killed in this movie. It's so fucked up and violent. But the 2 kill scenes that you do get here are pretty violent, pretty brutal, pretty intense, effective, and even some of the scenes where Esther is just fucking with people and hurting them, but not necessarily killing them, even those are very intense sequences. And if her intended kill would have went through, it would have been a really fucked up way to kill somebody. It's one of those very few movies that puts a kid in the central role of the psycho, of the killer, but doesn't shy away from the violence as if it was an adult killer, as if it was somebody that there wouldn't be this taboo thing attached to it. And so I've always admired the fact that this movie had a little bit more guts. Even just the subject matter that they're exploring in this movie with stillborn children, with substance abuse, with infidelity, with, I mean, even by the end of the movie, there's like moments there before you understand what's going on that almost feels like pedophilia is about to be going down or something like that. So it's a movie that goes for some pretty extreme stuff. And to me, it just makes it all the more intense, all the more effective, and all the more memorable. And in particular, I think that the way that they explore grief in this movie in multiple ways is really effective and very subtle as well. It's not very heavy-handed at all. I mean, you have the whole thing that opens up with the stillborn nightmare, so that's right in your face from the moment the movie starts. And they explore that in a very good way, in different ways, with Vera Farmiga's character being a lot more traumatized by this to where it kind of consumes her life, and then Peter Sarsgaard, who's much more just kind of detached and quiet about the entire thing, which tends to be the case for fathers and husbands, because you kind of have to be the stronger one to keep everybody together. Most men are not allowed to express their emotions in the way that is probably the most healthy way. So I appreciated the way that they did that. But even with the couple trauma between the two, because of the stillborn event, because of Vera Farmiga's past alcoholism and the almost death of Maxine, which led to her, hearing disability, you have multiple events throughout the first act of the film to where they seem very sexually expressive towards each other. Like they're just horny for each other all the time. And very quickly in the second act, you're given this reveal that he was unfaithful and she had this alcoholism, and then it just reframes the entire previous 30 minutes of the movie to where you look at it as, oh no, they're not just like super in love and super horny for each other. They're trying to fill all these gigantic voids in their relationship with sex. And so very few movies can explore very realistic things like that without going over the top, without glamorizing it, or without just kind of failing to actually make the point they're trying to make. So for a movie that could very easily just be this very straightforward slasher, I like the fact that there's all these other things explored in a very dark and borderline horrific way that are just real-world human situations. But despite how large and how extreme some of the subjects they're going for, despite how intense a lot of the sequences are in the movie, I also was impressed with the fact that how restrained they were on giving hints about what's really going on, giving hints towards the eventual third act reveal without letting that overshadow the entire movie, without letting that be so in your face that you're looking for it. At the most of the film, you're just thinking this is a fucked up kid, and you're trying to figure out what was that event that made her fucked up. You're waiting for that answer. Where did she come from? What was the thing that broke Esther? And when you know the third act reveal, you go back to it, you start looking at all these little clues, all these little lines of dialogue, all these things that are these little dominoes and building blocks building up to the eventual fall, but it never really seemed like something that was just overshadowing the rest of the storytelling. To the point which would be a negative on this film if it wasn't completely unfair for me to hold it against the film, to the point where I watched this movie for the first time after having the ending blown for me, after having it spoiled by my own mother.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
I remember like it was yesterday. I was in my dad's den that he called it. I was playing video games while they were watching the movie. I had planned on watching it later, but I was sucked into what I was doing. My younger brother at some point lost interest in the movie and came in and played with me. And then after the movie was over, my mom just opened up the little sliding doors to my brother to tell him what happened. She goes, "She's 33 years old." What the fuck? So yeah, there's no telling how much more I would love this movie if I had the shock and the big revealing moment of the third act. I might even enjoy this even more. This might be up in my top 50 horror films of all time, if that was the case. But I watched the movie knowing all throughout it where it was going. And I still have always felt like the movie did a great job at kind of concealing that and not showing its hand too early. Now, talking specifically about the twist ending itself, I do think it's one of the better twist endings out there. It's a shame I couldn't experience it live action, but as far as the idea on paper, having this little girl actually be this middle-aged woman with dwarfism who is obsessing over these men, trying to get this love, this affection that she's never had, and then going psycho on them while systematically killing the family and pushing the mother out, it's a pretty fucked up concept, and I think they execute it very well. Where in the third act, when they have to make Isabelle Fuhrman look like a 33-year-old, they do a really convincing job with the makeup and with the false teeth and everything. And it's kind of funny because in this film, she was 12 years old and they had to try to make her look older. Whereas now in the prequel, she's an older woman that they have to now make look like a 12-year-old girl. But once all that's revealed through that phone call with Vera Farmiga, and you've got Peter Sarsgaard sitting at home and his fate just seems sealed at that point, although I was still surprised that he bit it at the end, I thought that it was a really well-executed twist, which is all of the battle. You can have a great idea all you want, but if you don't execute it right, you ain't got shit. Moving on to the mixed aspect, and the main one is Peter Sarsgaard's character, the husband. Now, on one end, I think because Vera Farmiga is so good at being emotional, like I said, it's convincing that some people would look at her emotions and think this is a person who's crazy, this is a person that just is projecting all of her insecurities and all of her guilt and everything on this little girl. I need to protect that little girl from this crazy ass bitch. I totally understand a part of that. Unfortunately, there are so many events throughout this film that are almost right in front of Sarsgaard's eyes, and especially if you have any love or trust with your wife whatsoever and she's telling you all these things that are going on that maybe you didn't witness yourself, he is the worst husband ever as far as being supportive. He doesn't give a shit what Vera Farmiga says throughout this entire film. And the more that she tries to convince him, the more that he turns on her. And it's only in the very first moment, the very one single solitary moment, that Esther makes him feel uncomfortable. Within seconds, he's like, "Ah, fuck this. I'm calling the nun in the morning. Your ass is gone." I mean, you got the kid at school that claims that Esther pushed her and she broke her ankle. It's one kid versus the other. I understand a little bit of ambiguity there. Then you get the whole thing where she cuts out all of the memorial flowers, knowing goddamn well that that was memorial. That's pretty cut and dry, and it's all Peter Sarsgaard's fault for suggesting an idea and not supervising her. Yet he dismisses the entire thing, even though that is gut-wrenching for Vera Farmiga's character. Then you have every single thing that their son says about Esther, and he's just like, "Whatever, you little prick, go away. I don't want to hear anything from you either. You're just like your mother." There's even a moment where Vera Farmiga says, "Hey, Esther told me you were flirting with that big-tittied bitch from across the street. What you got to say about that?" And he's just like, "Ha ha ha. Nonsense." Even at that point, any self-respecting dad would pull Esther aside and be like, "What did you say to your mother? Look, I'm the only motherfucker on your side. You start fucking with me, we'll make shit real uncomfortable around here." So while I think that part of my reception of his character is saved based purely off of Vera Farmiga's performance, He's an extremely unlikable character that is so frustrating, and I hate the trope in horror movies where you have to have one or multiple characters be complete fucking oblivious morons in order to make the plot work. I just think there's smarter ways to get from A to Z, and so this movie has moments of frustration just off of his character for me. And now moving on to the negatives of Orphan, and I cannot stand the son Daniel in this movie. One of the most insufferable kid characters that I can think of in recent memory. Now, I know he's portrayed as that age where kids certainly do the things that he is doing, and they definitely pull some sympathy out of you in the back half of the film because he is continuously about to be murdered by Esther, and he is just like literally pissing himself. So you kind of feel bad for him in the back half, but in the front half, fuck that kid. Ever since I became a parent and I deal with these parental frustrations and kids being disrespectful and talking out of turn and all that other bullshit, it's very hard for me to watch a movie with a kid that's just walking all over his parents. I want to jump into the screen and do some drive-by parenting to help them out. Like, fucking quit saying it! Shit, they're your parents, mother... I mean, when he bullies her at school, that's dickheaded enough, but peer pressure's a thing. It's whenever you get the dinner scene where he is just being a belligerent prick to everybody, and he's just calling her out at the dinner table, at this point for no reason, aside from the fact that she's just different. Calling out the way that she eats, calling out the way that she dresses, and both the parents are just like, come on, Daniel, stop it. And he just keeps going, okay, come on, Daniel, stop it. And he just keeps going, okay, Daniel, that's enough now, leave her alone.
I don't want any more talk like that, all right?
But why does she have to act like that? All my friends make fun of me because of her.
Maybe you need some different friends.
Maybe you should send her back to the retard camp where she belongs.
Daniel!
And then he ends it all off with the cherry of, she's not my fucking sister. And they just look and they go, put the fork down. What are we gonna do with this kid? Maybe it's just my childhood memories of the lines that you do not cross with your parents, the way that I was raised that just enrages me when I see stuff like that. But there's like a certain level you can get to where you're approaching I'm about to get knocked the fuck out level of talking down to your parents. And he just goes way above wherever that ceiling was for me. I just imagine myself with my kids. It's like, what did you just say? I said, fuck you, Dad. But all in all, guys, I really do enjoy this movie and I recommend it to anybody. Incredible performances by the two leads. You have a very effective third act twist and very brutal throughout regarding the subject matter as well as the violence. So if you're a fan of slashers, if you're a fan of creepy kids, absolutely check this one out. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed this, please click over here for my top 50 horror films, and I'm also gonna put a playlist of all of my 2022 new release reviews. Please like and share this video and hit that subscribe button if you want to see my review of Orphan First Kill in a couple days. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.